I know some of you were able to meet with Pastor Mike yesterday afternoon, but some didn't. So we're going to open that up a little bit this morning so you can talk to them, and we'll go from there. But it was an exciting day. I was coming down the highway and I looked down and I was doing 98. I was so excited. Oh man, I just want to get to church. So I backed down off of that, of course, but I was excited to come to church. We were up early and to get here. So we'll turn it over to you, Pastor Mike. You would do an open with prayer?
Sure, I sure can. It's good to see all of you today. Let's open in a word of prayer. Father God, thank you again for your goodness to us. And we just thank you for guiding and directing our lives, our country, our families. We know that you direct the smallest details. And when you were here on earth, Lord Jesus, you told us that you had numbered the hairs of our head, and that not a single sparrow ever fell from heaven that you weren't aware of. And we are much more valuable than those sparrows. And so we thank you for that confidence that we can have in you. And I just pray that you be in everything that is said and done today for your glory and honor. Amen. So let me just ask this question, because I don't want to repeat too much and bore too many of you. How many of you were in one of the two? How many of you were in one of the two sessions yesterday? How many of you? Okay, a few of you were not. Okay, and that's okay, because that's one reason we're talking as well today. So I'm stepping back a little bit because I'm getting a little bit of reverb. At least I'm hearing that a little bit. Do you hear that? Yeah. Okay. So I don't want you to be. You'll have to adjust a little bit. My mom named me Mike. Catch up with me. You'll get it in a second. Okay? It'll occur to you. But so anyway. Yes, so my mom named me Mike, and I have my dad's voice. So anyway, my wife will sometimes say to me, I'm right here, you don't have to preach at me. And so I don't think I'm preaching, but I think maybe I am. So anyway, so I can go one of two directions, and I'm fine with that. Would you like, because I know I told the group yesterday a little bit about ourselves and our family. Would you like me to do that again? For those that weren't here yesterday, I don't want to bore anyone, but at the same time, I think that's maybe a good reference point. And we can do that, and I can do that in 5 or 10 minutes. Okay. So, I'm 57, and my wife is younger than I am. So I always put that in there. So, but we are high school sweethearts, and we've been hanging out together for 42 years. We met when Elma came up to the Christian school that I was attending in Tempe, Arizona. Tempe is a suburb of Phoenix. So let me start back before that. And when I was born into an evangelist family. Does everybody know what an evangelist is? Your former pastor's wife's dad. So did I just do that right? Yeah, was an evangelist. And Dr. Schuler had a huge impact on my life. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. But Dr. Schuler was a roommate with Dr. Singleton at Bob Jones in 1946, when all the war vets came back off of World War II, of which Dr. Singleton was a part as well, and Dr. Schuler was. A lot of them went to Bob Jones in the GI Bill, and there was a huge rush of these guys that had seen men die in battle and knew that life was short, and they wanted to change. They wanted to win people to Christ. So anyway, Dr. Singleton was my pastor for years and years. And I succeeded him at Tri-City Baptist in Tempe. Well, he was very close to Dr. Schuler because they were roommates for 3 years at Bob Jones, and they sat next to each other. Schuler, Singleton, you can see how they sat next to each other in all their classes, right? So that's how I know Brother Ross and his dear wife as well. So we traveled on the road as a small child. Every week we were in a different church until I was 6. And when I was 6 in 1969, we moved here to Inglewood. 4289 South Bannock is the home. My parents bought that little house for $19,000. I did a Zillow search on it a few weeks ago, and it had been sold a couple years ago, and they had the pictures of how they remodeled it and stuff. it's still a Cracker Jack house, unless you're gonna add, you know, a whole wing on the house in the backyard, and it is sold, I think, for $450,000. And I sent it to my parents, and I said, just think how rich you'd have been if you'd just held on to this house for a couple more years, you know. But anyway, my mom.
Pastor Mike, could you just get it closer to that mic?
I sure can. It was getting some reverb, and that's the reason are we better now? Got it, they fixed it back there, okay. My dad, we had traveled. We stopped traveling when I was in first grade, and my mom began teaching at Silver State Baptist Schools. Many of you know of Silver State Baptist Schools from those days. South Sheridan Baptist Church, Dr. Nelson, Guyla Nelson. Dr. Nelson and Guyla were very close friends of my parents. So my mom taught fourth grade there. And my dad and my uncle, Jim, and his wife, Kaylin, began traveling in evangelism together as a team. And their very first meeting in September 1969 was, as a team, was at Littleton Baptist Church. Their very first meeting was here. And they traveled for 3 years together. And my uncle took an assistant pastorate in Pennsylvania. And then we began traveling with them in a trailer. By that time, I had a little brother who's 9 years younger than I am. And the four of us traveled for 3 years. My sister was born. My sister's 12 years younger than I am. And my mom's parents had moved to Phoenix and had found this church, Tri-City Baptist Church, that had been founded by Dr. Singleton just a couple of years before, and it was just growing by leaps and bounds. We moved to Arizona, and my second semester of sixth grade, I had started attending Tri-City Christian Academy. Graduated from there 6.5 years later, and that's where I met my wife. When she came up there, came from Yuma, a small town in southern Arizona, came up there to go to school in the church. We went through high school together, went through college together. Graduated in 1985, got married in 1985. I told one of the groups yesterday, my claim to fame is that I share an anniversary with Vice President Pence and Karen. They both got married. We both got married on June 8th, 1985. It seems to have worked out pretty good for both of us. So there must be something in the water on that day or something like that, but held the marriages together. So from there we went to seminary. My wife was younger than me, and she began teaching third grade in a Christian school outside of Philadelphia, and I began going to seminary. So the next 3 years, we traveled every summer and did vacation Bible schools in smaller churches that didn't have the ability really to do vacation Bible school, and so we would do the children in the morning. It would just be us, and then I would do teen activities and preach every night. We would do 8 or 9 churches every summer and come right back to seminary in the fall, and I worked in a public school as a custodian. We did that for 3 years, and that was a 96-hour graduate degree back in those days, was the Master of Divinity. Then when we graduated, we were 25. Well, I was 25, you were younger than me. And she's 3 months younger than me, so that's what the joke is. Right now, we're in that place where I'm a year older than she is, so she's always reminding me this 3-month section of our year that she's younger than me. So anyway, then we traveled for 3 years. We had 2 children in those 3 years. We had a trailer, and we went in and were involved in evangelistic meetings. We were headquartered out of a church in Saginaw, Michigan, and I was kind of the assistant pastor for evangelism when we were in town. And I had two children. In fact, today is my daughter's 30th birthday. She's the second. Our boy was born in '89. Our daughter was born in '90. And today is her 30th birthday. And my son, who's 17 months older than her, texted her in our family group today and said, "Happy birthday, Sarah." And her nickname is Sarah Bearer. So he said, "Happy birthday, Sarah Bearer." He said, "The 30s are great. You get more tired. You lose your hair. Just all these things that are going to happen to her in her 30s. He's 17 months older than she is. Just like he's massively older than she is. But so my son is Air Force Academy grad. I told the groups that yesterday. He's a combat pilot. Had 5 deployments. It's about 3,000 combat hours in his jet. He's getting ready to deploy again next spring. He's married, has a little girl. Ellie girl is what we call her, and she just turned 1. Just turned 1, yeah. I have to get my ages and my grandkids right. My daughter and son-in-law are in the church where I pastored. Grew up there. They're at Tri-City. Now we moved into Chandler, so a different suburb. We moved there to Chandler about 11 years ago, and she has 2 children. Brandon is her husband. Braden and Bentley. And Braden is 2.5 and Bentley is 5 months. So that's kind of our family. After we got out of seminary and traveled for 3 years, the Lord, some really amazing circumstances, God incognito, providence, sovereignty, directed us in the chaplaincy. So July 21st, 1991, or excuse me, July 15th, 1991, I raised my hand. And so I have been a commissioned officer for 29 years and 3 months, and give or take a couple of days. And we went on active duty again through an amazing amount of circumstances that never happened. First base was at Beale Air Force Base. Took a small congregation of 15. And in about 2.5 years, we were running 220. Started with a Bible study for singles right in the dorm area. People told me it'll never work on Friday night. All the singles go to the bars on Friday night, go to the club on Friday night. They'll never come to a Bible study. I said, well, we'll see. I said, why do you do it on Wednesday night? I said, no, I want to do it on Friday night because they're going to have to choose God or the bar, and I want to make them choose that. And I said, they will enjoy my activity more than that because they'll actually remember what they did on Friday night on Saturday morning. So anyway, did that for 3 years. Eventually, that group was running 60 on Friday night. They gave us a room in the dorm area, and eventually we outgrew that room, and they gave us the whole community center. And we would order pizza every Friday night, and we would sit there and study the Bible for 2 or 3 hours. And just a really great group. From there, we moved on to Guam. Did the exact same thing. Took a congregation in the chapel of about 90, and over the next 2 years, it grew to about 450. And we just had the privilege of seeing hundreds of airmen, soldiers, Marines, because it was a co-located base with different branches, Navy, come to know Christ in those 5 years. And then our founding pastor at Tri-City, Dr. Singleton, my mentor, called me up and said, I'm looking at retiring in a few years. Would you consider coming back? He had talked to the deacons about it. They were in favor. So we left active duty, went back to Tri-City, and we served there for 23 years. And 3 years as a transition and co-pastor, and then the last 20 as the senior pastor. During that time, I stayed in the reserves, transferred over into the Guard, and ended up becoming the senior chaplain for the wing at Phoenix, and then was promoted to colonel, and began commuting 4 or 5 times a year to Germany. So I would preach on Sunday night, and first thing Monday morning at 6, I would get on a plane and fly to Frankfurt, and then spend 2, 3, 4 weeks there, working on the senior level staff as the liaison between the Guard and the regular Air Force. And we did that every summer. She would be off from teaching school, and we had some great, I would arrange it so we'd always have the July 4th weekend while we were there, so we would get a 4-day weekend. And we went to London one year, we went to Normandy another year, we went to Paris another year, and we did Prague and Berlin another year. And I'm a historian. I love Baptist history, but I love history. And so I got to go to famous Anabaptist church, Balthasar Hupmeyer in Waldshut, Germany, and stand in the pulpit. He preached against indulgences in the 1520s, and that was exciting for me. I got to go to Zurich and see the little plaque on the river there where they threw the Anabaptist Felix Mons into the river and drowned him because he was unwilling to sprinkle his baby. And then one summer we got to go and worship at Spurgeon's church in London, and that was kind of cool for someone who's a Baptist. So got to do all those things. Came back to our church, was looking at retiring, and from the Air Force, and the 3-star general over the Air National Guard contacted our 2-star general in Arizona and said, I know it's a big ask, but I've seen Mike's biography. Would he consider leaving his church and coming to Washington for a couple of years and helping right the ship of some problems that are in the Air National Guard chaplaincy? So Elma and I prayed about that. It was tough to leave. My mother-in-law, okay, that wasn't tough to leave, but I'm joking. My mother-in-law has lived with us for about 15 years, and my daughter and son-in-law are there. My mom and dad are there. My dad is in declining health. He has dementia, and my mom is in declining health. They're in their mid-80s, and my brother and sister-in-law are there with their kids, and my daughter and my sister and brother-in-law are there with their 3 kids. So all of our family is within 6 miles of us, 7 miles of us, and so that was a really tough decision for us to move to DC, but we really felt the Lord was calling us to do that. They'd never had a conservative ever as a senior leader in the Chaplain Corps in the Air National Guard. And so the Lord has really blessed our ministry there. But we know our time is coming to an end there. And we had honestly had assumed we would just move back to Arizona. Family's all there. That's what our assumption was. And I'll have a smaller retirement than an active duty officer, but I have retirement. She works online as a public charter school teacher, so she can pretty much work from anywhere. And she's been working back and forth from DC to Arizona. She has to go back to Arizona 4 or 5 times a year for certain events, but she can work from anywhere. But our thought was we'll just move back to Arizona. And the Lord began to really burden our heart about 6 months ago for so many churches that don't have pastors. And I'm not young, I'm not old. So I'm 57, so I think that, there's a few more rings that could be implanted around this tree before it, keels over. And I just know that the need is great for pastors of churches of like faith and doctrine. And so we just began to put out some feelers to some of my friends, and was directed to your church, several other churches. So we have had discussions with numerous churches about where God would have us to go, what God would have us to do. And so I've had good discussions with your pulpit committee, came and preached for all of you a few weeks ago and continue those discussions. And so that brings us to today. So I'll be quiet. My wife, Elma, is down here. You're welcome to ask either one of us questions. I'm a strong believer in congregational government. So the vote of the people on any subject on that particular day is God's will on that day for that church. I hope you heard it, what I said. So I do not believe that 4 or 5 people, as smart as your pulpit committee is, and as good as they are, that they should vote amongst themselves and pick a pastor and hand him to you. I don't believe that's biblical. There are a lot of churches that do exactly that today in evangelical. Most of your big churches around here, that's exactly how they operate. We have big churches in Arizona, and one day the pastor's gone and they have a new pastor and they changed the church the next Sunday, and the people didn't even get a chance to what's going on. And I don't believe that's biblical. So this is your opportunity to ask any questions, whatever you're thinking, fire away. I'll be quiet. Yes?
If you were to take the position here, would you still be able to continue your chaplaincy up until retirement, your 30-year retirement?
That's a really good question, isn't it? That's a hard question for me to answer, isn't it? Because there are things I can't talk about. The answer is yes. There is a potential so I'm in full-time status right now. Okay, anybody ever served in the military? Any military, former military? Okay. So if you're former military, you know the difference, and maybe some of you intuitively know the difference between what we would call regular Air Force, which is your full-time, what my son does, and a guardsman or reservist. The difference between a guardsman and reservist is I'm an Arizona guardsman, which means the governor is my boss. For a Colorado guardsman, the governor of Colorado is their boss. Right now, I've been federally activated, which means I am now, Donald Trump is my boss. However, if my governor doesn't like that, he can yank me back to Arizona and take me away from Donald Trump. Okay? So that's part of the issue with civil unrest and calling out the National Guard, that sometimes the governors didn't want that. And there's that back and forth. We call it federalism. Okay? Now, a reservist is always under the authority of the president, not the state. So this is that federalism issue. So when I leave active duty, which probably happens in the next 4 or 5 months, 3 months, 6 months, there's a window there. Yes, I can continue on for a couple more years. I've got a couple offers on the table that would be, I could telework to do some work. It might be traveling back and forth to Arizona a couple, 3 weeks a year and overseeing the Air National Guard as the senior chaplain for the state of Arizona. They already have somebody in that position here in Colorado who's actually a good friend of mine. So it wouldn't be Colorado. We've had these discussions because of the secrecy of senior leaders and their decisions that sometimes I don't even know about. I have to be very careful of what I can say. But I fully disclosed that to the pulpit committee about how we would work through that. When I was on orders at Tri-City, Tri-City never paid me a salary. The government paid my salary. So we worked that for the last 23 years. And a lot of churches do it that way. Because you have a lot of, most guard chaplains, reserve chaplains are pastors. And so, I don't know, I tried to dance around the question without revealing anything I wasn't supposed to reveal, but give you information on it as well. Do you have a follow-up or anything you'd like to ask in addition? Okay. The short answer is yes. The long answer is it depends on what 3- and 4-star generals want to do with me. And they were supposed to make those decisions about 3 months ago, and we had COVID and civil unrest, and everybody's been really busy. So, good question though. So my wife's comment is it doesn't affect and never affected at Tri-City my ability to be a pastor. I did it for 23 years. Lots of, it doesn't affect, we would say in the military you adjust fire, so I've been doing it for a long time. I'll go back there and then I'll come over here. Yes, ma'am.
Yesterday you mentioned like that you would like to see us do more outreach and things like that.
Mhm.
What types of outreach are you thinking about in the community?
So I think there's all kinds of things. One of the things that I started when I went to Tri-City 25 years ago was here at the Halloween season. We did in our gymnasium, we set up booths and had candy and had activities, and we called it Family Fun Night. And kids could come in costumes if they wanted, but they didn't have to feel pressured to do that. And we created a family environment that was safe. And we would have 300-400 kids from our neighborhood come to our Family Fun Night, and then in their bag they would get literature about Christ, and we would have families that would sometimes visit our church later. And in fact, in the years, I think we even won a few families to Christ that way. I mean, that's just one of many. I could see you have such a wonderful facility to reach your community. I could see down the road, a Wednesday afternoon youth, preteen, pizza, Bible discussion group, activity after school on a Wednesday. I think Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, but doing it that way. There's Kids for Christ. There's Pass the Pirate. There's Awana. There's numerous different activities for kids that you can do in your environment. I've always worked with a Christian school that gives you limiting factors on when you can do certain things. The advantage you have without having a Christian school is you can do Wednesday afternoon children's clubs. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do in that regard. Part of it would be me finding out what you're doing, not doing, what are the skill sets in the congregation, who's willing to do what, which I don't know. But those are just some examples of things we can do. You want to follow up on that, or is that good? Fantastic.
Yeah, that was kind of my question, if you could just, what you would, like yesterday you were saying, lay out the future where you see, in 3 years, 4 years, what your plan is.
Well, so first of all, I would have to sit in the seat for probably 6 months and get, okay, so One of my favorite sayings is, I never lie, but the truth changed. Okay, now that sounds terrible, but in the military, it's exactly how you have to operate. Because I can go to my team and say, I was just briefed this by the 3-star, and here's where we're going. And a week later, the 4-star told the 3-star, we're going a different direction. The 3-star comes back and says, no, we're going that way. And I come back and my team goes, well, you just told us a week ago we're going there. And I go, yeah, I didn't lie, the truth changed. On the moment I told you that, that is what I believed to be truth. And now I've gotten different directions from my boss. So I hesitate to say things that here is what I can see us doing when I don't know I don't know everything about your giving. I don't know about the willingness in the church. I don't know, is someone willing to serve and they don't have the skill set, and then I need to teach the skill set, or are they unwilling to serve and I need to come alongside of them and cajole them into serving, and or ask the Holy Spirit to convict them. I don't know, whatever. I don't know those answers yet. Okay. However, down the road, I really think, there's a couple different ways you can go. You have a parsonage. Steve and I have been talking about that. You have a parsonage that with your housing prices that just would make chiclets, swallow your chiclets, what the housing prices are. You're going to struggle to get a youth pastor couple of 31 or 32 they're going to pay 40% of their income probably is going to go to housing. And that's going to be, we call it a limb fact. That's going to be a limiting factor in what you can do, is what can you afford. But as I told Steve, I think you have the answer there in that you can have a parsonage for that young couple, and you don't have to be out as much cash. You can fix up a home, and they have free housing. That's the way the church historically had a parsonage. I mean, that's pretty normal. If not that, you can find interns. There are lots of really quality young men that are single that would like to do a Master of Divinity. Seminary is now easily accessible online. I had the privilege of starting the seminary facet of International Arts College and Seminary, and you can do the entire 90-hour degree program online, live teaching. It's live teaching, but you can do it online with professors from Maranatha, if you're familiar with Maranatha, and IBCS, and just get an incredible education. I can see you bringing in a youth pastor intern, an administrative intern that are 23, 25, 26. Maybe they're still single, so then you could have 2 guys living in that house, and you're paying them, you're giving them a free seminary, free graduate school, paying them a smaller amount, and they're doing a lot of training themselves in pastoral care. When we were a young couple at 23, 24 going to seminary, if somebody had offered me that job, I would have been just so super excited. I would have loved to have worked under a pastor that had experience and was offering me just, be creative and create a program in our church. So I think there's a lot of guys that would be very interested in doing something like that. And especially if you said, 3 years of seminary paid for, but you're going to stay with us for 6 years. It's like an indentured servant. Does anybody know your history enough to know about indentured servants? So you'd be a pastoral indentured servant. So, but I promise you wouldn't put an awl in your ear and poke a hole in your ear. I would promise them that. So I don't know. That's just one, which I think is pretty inexpensive, actually. I think that's a very inexpensive way forward to get. And we talked about this yesterday. I hope I'm not being offensive when I say it. I'm always pretty transparent. This congregation has 10 to 12 years to bring in younger couples. That's just the way it is. And that's whoever your next pastor is, while ministering to the congregation is absolutely important, that pastor has to keep his eye on the ball on we must get younger. And you have the facility to do that. You have the demographics in the neighborhood to do that. You have that here. So does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody with a follow-up on that, or you want to go a different direction? Yes, ma'am.
With COVID-19 and how much the world has changed in the past few months,
Yep.
do you foresee any lasting impacts to outreach and ministry efforts? And do you have any ideas for how to address those?
That's a great question. Okay, so, I said this yesterday, so I want to be very careful so I don't come across as undermining the danger we live in, okay, because we do. If you're not washing your hands, I mean, there's a whole list of things, right? And I know there's a lot of disagreement on this, that, or the other thing, so I'm not going to do that. But this is worse than the flu, okay? But it's nothing like other human pandemics. We're not even close to other human pandemics, okay? So I said yesterday, I don't know if you were there, but I compared it to the Spanish flu of 1918, 1919. The estimates on death from Spanish flu, the low number is 50 million, the high number is 100 million. Right now we're at a million, and there's a lot of debate over are people dying with COVID or from COVID, and that's an honest discussion, right? Both my kids have had COVID. My daughter had COVID right after she gave birth to our second grandson. My son-in-law had COVID. She was on maternity leave. He was teleworking. He kept working. They lost smell. They lost taste. They're fine today. She had a newborn and a 2-year-old. The kids never got sick. They just ran around the house, and she was concerned. She's nursing, but they got sick. They weren't deathly ill or anything like that. In fact, Elma and I both got the flu in 2018. Does anyone remember the flu that went around in 2018? I took her to the emergency room in 2018. We were way sicker in 2018 with that flu than my kids were with COVID. That doesn't mean it's still not dangerous. So I remind us, I'm a historian, and I remind us of history. So the Spanish flu followed World War I. What most people don't remember, because there's other things that happened in the 20s. But we still need to have 49 million humans to die before we get the low end of the death from the Spanish flu. The low end is 50 million. The high end is 100 million. So, and that followed World War I. More people died with the Spanish flu than the trench warfare in Europe. So, I'm getting to your question, but I want to put it, you'll find I give you historical context in almost everything, because as I taught history to my college students, and I've done that for 25 years, I always reminded them, history didn't begin the day you were born. We're all like that. We all think history began the day we were born. I was reading a book on the plane in here on how we got our Constitution, and the 4 men, John J. Adams, John J. Hamilton, Madison, and Washington, who really gave us the Second American Revolution, which was the Constitution, because the Articles of Confederation were basically 13 separate countries. And so I love reading history. So what I would say is, the Spanish flu was over in 1919, and there's a nomenclature for the 20s. Does anybody know the nickname for the 20s? It's a one-word nickname for the 20s. The Roaring 20s. I think technology in and of itself is changing. I mean, what we're doing right here with this, right? That's changing. Might it be speeded by COVID? Possibly. But after 100 million people possibly died, at least 50 million, you have the Roaring 20s and speakeasies, and if you see pictures from that time, nobody was socially distancing a year after the pandemic is over. And you have pictures of them wearing masks in barbershops, cutting hair with the mask. I mean, they wore masks. I mean, go back to the pandemics of London in the 1700s. They all wore masks. They got it. So I think technology is absolutely changing. COVID may have a small impetus in pushing it forward for ministry, but technology is going to change certain things. What won't change is that Jesus Christ came to be with his people. That Christianity is uniquely about personal relationships. And I'm just going to tell you, I'm doing all my meetings, my trainings are on Teams. I'm on Teams all the time. And I'm just telling you something, people are fed up with Teams. I mean, I am doing distance training constantly on Teams. We have our staff meeting on Teams every week. People are fed up with Teams. They want the personal interaction. So I've had people I've read articles, the church is going away, it's going to be all in the cloud. Christianity is a uniquely personal, and I think there's actually going to be a pendulum swing back in 6 months or a year. People are going to be craving church and fellowship and the family and the handshaking and the hugging. I think there is so what I would say is probably we could maybe work on the website, online giving. I'm sermon audio. I'm all over sermon audio. I think we can do Facebook Live with sermons. I think there's a huge reach that we can do stuff like that. But the church as we know it is not going to go away because it's a uniquely relational structure. So I talked a long time, but does that help you get where I'm coming from? Outstanding. Somebody else? Yes, sir.
What does worship look like to you?
That is a great question. What you do on Sunday morning reflects what you've done all the other 6 days of the week. I want that to sink in. If you come Sunday morning and you say, wow, we need, now that's not saying we shouldn't have good pianists and a good choice of music, and that's not what I'm saying. Please don't misunderstand. But if you need fire to be manipulated, let's go back to the Old Testament story. Remember when the tabernacle was finished in the desert and fire fell from heaven, and it was God's attaboy, attagirl, and the children of Israel for doing it the way He wanted, and the people shouted. 2 million people. Can you imagine how far away as they're shouting that God's presence was with them? And then, what's the next day? Aaron's sons. How do we top that? Anybody remember the story? And they went and they put false fire. And they said, come on, let's put false fire and let's top what God did. We need more excitement. Because the normal life of worship isn't exciting enough. We need something bigger. And what did God do? God killed them. Because God wasn't enough. They needed to gin up excitement. Now, I said yesterday, somebody clapped, and I said, hey, Psalm 47:1 says, clap your hands for joy. There's nothing wrong with clapping your hands when you're excited. Go watch Jewish worship. They're very exciting. Very, that's absolutely fine. That's different than, come on, you guys aren't singing. Come on, what's wrong with you? The answer isn't for me to lecture you. The answer is for all of us to be worshiping privately through the week, so that when we come into this in corporate setting, we exude the overflow of what we've been doing all week long. I get up in the morning and I go walking. I pray, put Christian music in my earbuds, and I go out for an hour and a half in the morning, and that's my time with God. And when it's cool, when it's warmer, I can go out and walk trails, and I can sing at the top of my lungs, and I don't scare the deer. Sometimes run away, When I go to the gym, I have to just sing in my head, But that's part of my worship time. So I think when we think of worship, number one, worship is not something we do an hour at church on Sunday. That's a subset of worship. Worship is a lifestyle. So the word worship comes from the Greek word to kneel. That's the word. It means we get our word to kneel from it. Okay? So what worship is a lifestyle of kneeling before God. So when I say lifestyle worship, I mean everything in my life, every act, every word, every attitude should be me kneeling before God. Then when I come into what we would term corporate worship, that whole realm of submission to God comes into overflow of praise as I gather with my brothers and sisters and we sing, And I mean, I might not know the song, I may not have a good voice, I may say, wow, man, my voice isn't that great. Wait till you hear me sing. My voice isn't that great. But you know, you're going to hear me sing because I sing. Because I sing because I'm happy. I sing because Christ redeemed me. I sing because I'm thankful. I mean, if you don't have that in your soul through the week, it's going to be impossible for you to come in here. And then you gripe, not you personally, but then the gripe comes, well, you know, the song service is dead. We got to go someplace where the song service is alive. Okay, well, if the Spirit is in the middle of that alive song service, that's wonderful. If it's just made up to create false fire, then that's not wonderful at all. That's heresy. So, worship is bigger than Sunday morning. Sunday morning is the cherry on top of the cake of your lifestyle worship. And if you have no banana split of worship through the week, no whipped cream of worship through the week, no whatever your favorite ice cream is through the week, then you're going to come in on Sunday and, oh man, this is, okay, how much longer are we going to be here? Does that help? Yes, ma'am.
For you personally, in your view for the church, where does missions fit in and what priority is that for you as a church?
Great question. So I'm the son of an evangelist, and my father founded a mission agency in 1980. That mission agency has planted over 200 churches around the world. When I was at Tri-City, the missionaries, I was the president of a mission organization, International Baptist Missions, the one my father started. And that mission organization saw 3.5 million people place their faith in Christ through their missionaries and their converts. But 3.5 million people placed their faith in Christ in the 20 years that I pastored around the world. So missions to me is the lifeblood of the church. The Great Commission has 2 commands to it. Matthew 28:19 and 20 has 2 commands. One is that we are to make disciples, and the second command is that we are to keep our eyes on Him. Those are the 2 imperatives in those verses. So, missions is absolutely the lifeblood of the church. I've lived missions all my life. I've preached to large crowds in India of over 10,000 people. I've had the privilege of laying my hands on as the ordaining pastor of many men and couples sent to the mission field. So it can't be such that missions is the detriment of the church. In other words, I've known of churches that don't pay their pastor because we have to continue to pay missionaries. Well, that's out of whack, because eventually the missionaries won't get paid because the church will go under, right? So that's out of whack. But worldwide evangelism is at the core of my entire life. So that's a great question, but missions has to be a priority. Amen. So I would just ask, do you have a missions conference yearly, or have you had one in the past? So that would probably be something that I would be talking to leadership about doing. I've always had a missions conference. We brought in missionaries and did a week of challenging us on missions. But I don't want to say, again, what I would do, because I don't know the whole story yet. So, but I've always done a missions conference. Steve, are we done?
Yes.
Okay. So, you want to come up? I don't know what else you want to say, but we're going to start the morning service in a few minutes.
Well, we're going to do the 15 minutes.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, those deacons and the Morgans, would you come forward and we'll talk with you? We got 15 minutes, you can get a cup of coffee, and we'll reconvene and start our morning service. Thank you.